Thank you very much for giving me opportunity to interview you for my YouTube channel and podcast.
You're very welcome. I'm delighted to be here talking to you today.
So I've gone through your profile and I can see you're working on multiple domains and multiple platforms. So I thought to tell about you to my audience so that they get inspired and also they can learn a lot from you, from the experience that you have. So can you please introduce yourself to my audience?
So I'm Dr. Jacqui Taylor. I'm CEO of FlyingBinary. FlyingBinary is a web science company that changes the world with deep tech. And we run on a single mission. So it might seem like I'm doing a lot of things, but I'm doing one thing really. And our mission is inclusion. And by that, I mean, for the technology that we build, we leave no one behind. And so that's everything that we focus on. Everything we do is driven by that mission. And so far, we've positively impacted over half the world's population. And obviously, inclusion means we're not done, and we're busily looking at how we can positively impact over half the other half of the world's population. But in 2019, January 2019, I stood up at Davos to speak to 3,000 world leaders. And what I said to them was, the web science that we pioneered, we were about to change. So everything that we did when we founded in 2009 was on that inclusion mission, but specifically to build technology to unlock the talents of Generation Z. Generation Z are between the ages of 29 to 19 today. But in January 2019, I knew the following year in 2020 that Gen Z would already be influencing 40% of the world's economic spend. So I took the opportunity at Davos to say we were done. Now, Gen Z, not too thrilled at the idea that we were no longer building specifically for them. But that's because what we had then was the emergence of Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha are 18 to 8 today. And they use technology from an enablement point of view in a very different way. And so building on the work we'd learned from Generation Z and the technology we'd built to unlock their talents, we moved on to support Gen Alpha, and we've been building for them since 2019. But because of the pandemic, 1 billion additional people came online, and that's changed the world forever. And we now build for Gen Beta and Gen Alpha. Gen Beta are 7 and under. My youngest blue entrepreneur, climate entrepreneur, he's 3. We can't have a conversation about what he feels is important, what he cares about, but he can draw me pictures, which is what he does. My youngest Python programmer is 5, and he's looking to change the gaming world. So that's the work we do. Inclusion for us is not just unlocking talents for those who are neurotypical, though, because I'm visually disabled and I'm neurodiverse. I'm a dyslexic thinker, which is my superpower. And if any of you listening are also neurodiverse, the world I'm building, the world that I'll explain today is your world. That's who I'm building it for. So that's a quick overview of what I do and really my motivation, my purpose.
So what made you to start Flying Binary?
Right. Well, 21 years ago, I noticed a phenomenon. I was a very successful technologist. Today, I'm the 15th most influential technologist in the UK. But to then back 21 years ago, I was very successful. I'd done some major projects that were world renowned. But I'd noticed that this younger generation, Gen Z, I spoke about, were doing things, were using technology in a different way. And I knew that because our son was one of them. And there were 7 other young men in the school he was in who also were the same. That intrigued me. One of the things that I've done from my early years, my degree is in aerospace engineering. And in my early years, I've always been very curious about things. And what happened for me is as I got my degree, I came back into the aircraft factory that had trained me to discover I had no job because I was female and the aircraft that I'd helped design was being built for Saudi Arabia, and they did not want a female working on that project. So I trained all those years to discover I didn't have a job. But the managing director of my company was a pilot friend of mine. And he said to me, we need to do something useful now because this is a big blow. Big blow. I was furious. I said, yes, it is a big blow. And he said, I'd like you to work in the computing department because I can't work out what they're doing. And as an aerospace engineer, you know what they should be doing, i.e. what you need from them. And so let's see what happens. And for 6 weeks, no software was built. It was chaos. I'm an engineer and we have a discipline. And back in the day, there was no discipline in computing, as it's called then. So I became part of a group of people in the aerospace industry that introduced the term software engineering to our industry. And that aircraft I was building was our industry's first attempt to look at the impact we were having on society. So we were addressing the noise pollution that we caused with our aircraft. And I realized, as I got into my software engineering career, that actually I had a societal view of what was going on. I didn't just look, as many engineers do, in the detail, in the vertical. I was much more a horizontal thinker. And I think that early experience of losing my entire career made me very conscious of every move and decision I made to know whether I was doing something that was what I call purposeful. Did I understand the impact of what I was doing? And that early experience, as hard as it was, and it was devastating at the time, has set me on a path to make sure I make a contribution when I do whatever I do. And I think that was the origin of it all.
So what FlyingBinary is doing now?
Right. Well, in 2009, I took that web science research, not that I knew it was called that, into the Royal Society on the 20th anniversary of the World Wide Web. I was invited there by Tim Berners-Lee. And his view was, whatever he had done for the World Wide Web, it wasn't working. 18% of the world online, his vision not being achieved. There were 200 of them in the Royal Society that day. For those that are not familiar with the Royal Society in the UK, it's where Isaac Newton and his contemporaries built the science that has built our industrial society as it is today. And he invited us all in because he felt we all had a contribution to make to move the web towards his original goal. If Tim was here today, he would say the only reason he built the World Wide Web was to connect humanity to its own truth. And so he called us in there and said, you may have walked in my case, as an aerospace engineer, but you walk out today as a web scientist. And it's up to us what that's called. And that was a very different approach and required me to think about all the things that we were doing to say, well, did we want this resource, the web, to be, a gift to humanity, that societal thing I mentioned again? Or was it going to be, let's be honest, in the hands of the developed world, which is where it was? And no, in my case, it needed to do something different. So we founded FlyingBinary with that mission of inclusion, to build a technology to leave no one behind. And we pivoted, I don't know how many times, I would try and calculate, but it'll take me a while. But there are some pivotal points in building out that technology. In the same way, the 12th of March 2009 was the founding of FlyingBinary. The 15th of November 2015 was its first major pivot, because that day I was in the European Commission delivering my first ever speech on the industrial Internet of Things, because that's what we've always built for at FlyingBinary. Deep tech is for our connected world where there's usually no human in the loop. Not tech you're all using today, but tech that will connect our world without a human needing to be in the middle of that. And that is a responsibility to build tech like that, as much as It's going to happen. It's already happening. But let's not do that unconsciously. A lot of the movements across the world is to disinherit people, to do it without them. And we've always been conscious of that other agenda, that dystopian future that people talk about. And we don't believe in that. And we've built technology to prove it doesn't have to be that. But that was the day that Paris was attacked by terrorists. That was a Friday evening. I got back across the borders of Europe with a lot of help from the security forces. And I was back in Brussels on the Sunday, which would have been, so that was the 13th of November. I might have said the 15th. The 15th of November was when I came back to offer up the technology we'd been building. Because one of the things that I realized from 2009, and I've missed a bit, I need to say about that, is that there were many voices unheard across the world. And we needed to hear those voices at the tables I was sitting at. So I needed to find a way of connecting with those voices. And one of the pieces of technology that we offered up as part of our pivot to a counterterrorism company was the ability to connect to every single person on the planet that was online and ask them what we call in our counterterrorism world the wicked question, the question I can't know, but you know the answer to. And we'd started that work many years before, because one of the things I did, having left the Royal Society, founded FlyingBinary, my co-founder, who's our CTO, Ian. And one of the things was, how do we get messages across the entire world? So how do we not just talk to ourselves? How do we, excuse me a second. How do we include those unheard voices? And one of the things that I decided to do with the web science that we were pioneering was to actually, excuse me a minute, to actually reach out with the messages we were hearing with the web science work we were doing to say, is this a resonant message? Do you care about this? What might you make of this message? And actually that led to me working with an amazing journalist at The Guardian just excuse me a minute again, in the Guardian newspaper, who was a very well-respected journalist. And combining our web science and journalism, we created the data journalism industry. And the day that we pressed the button on that cloud service, Simon and I, there was just the two of us, Simon and I said, well, in fact, he said to me, I wonder if anybody will care. Within 2 hours, we had 22 million people across the world caring. And today, you know, our industry has delivered Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, Pandora Papers, the opiate scandal. We've got many more things in the works, but today our journalists are on the front line in Ukraine. They are following the soldiers in as they recapture Ukraine and documenting the war crimes. We depend on our journalists for hearing the truth. And that's really what Tim originally designed the web for humanity to understand its own truth. Investigative journalism, it was my contribution to that web science agenda. And today we have over 7 million journalists across the world. Many of them personal targets. Many of them lost their lives doing their job, including in Ukraine. But they do that in order to share that truth. And so when we gifted the technology to the counterterrorism fight after Paris was attacked, I already knew what the voices were telling us. We have something called a web observatory where we can ask those wicked questions and get the answers. And so really what this has been all about since we became a counterterrorism company is understanding how to protect those that seek to destroy our society, that seek to undermine the truth. Not because we have an agenda. In fact, we do have an agenda. We have an inclusion agenda so that everybody gets a voice, everybody's at the table. But there are many that don't want us to do our work today. Many. And so with the journalists across the world, with our FlyingBinary team and all the people we partner in, we're building something that we call the empathy economy. And that was because in December 2016, I'd been co-opted onto the UK team. The UK decided to leave Europe, become a separate state again. And by December, I knew this wasn't going to go well. I knew that there was going to be problems. Personally, I work all across the world. I have respect for every country in the world. My normal operating world would be Russia, China, and Iran. Not everything's bad the way we read it. My investigative journalists would tell you that. And, you know, it doesn't take many who are evil to destroy all of us, or to destroy the lifestyle we have for all of us. And so the reality of what was going on in December was I sat down with 219 of my contemporaries. We built the digital economy for the UK. There were actually 250 of us, but 30 of them had other ideas and sold out and lived a lifestyle. But the rest of us were in it because we believed technology was an enabler to solve some of our biggest problems in the world. And we wanted to, you know, personally, I was trying to get that capability across the world such that those voices I was in contact with would get that opportunity. But the other teams were doing different things. And I posed the question to them, this is not going to go well, Brexit. I'm already pivoting FlyingBinary to do something different. This is December 2016. What should we do? And their answer was, why ask us? The industrial Internet of Things, you've been building it since 2009. You're going to do that. You decide. So I took 2017 out to answer that question as to what was needed, and essentially found out why we have the world today online, which is very far from what we imagined sat in the Royal Society with Tim on the 12th of March 2009. What we'd imagined, what we delivered, it wasn't what we were looking for. That was not going to connect humanity with its own truth. That was actually making a very few people very rich and pretty much everybody else poorer. So that was not an inclusion agenda. So then it was a question of finding out what was. And that's when I founded the empathy economy, to discover what that was, which I have now done.
So, as a founder of FlyingBinary, have you created the impact that you wanted while you're thinking about to create it?
So I think that we've done a lot to advance many people's lives, and particularly we have contributed to the world hearing the voices of Gen Z and Gen Alpha now, and that is definitely a better thing. But the problem that now faces me is that sharing economy, which is what it's called, what we sat in the Royal Society talking about, the idea that you have a business model where you get technology to enable you to do what you do, some of it for free and some of it for paid, has actually created mainly a free economy, but of course with a product. So when you get tech for free, never for free. You sell yourself. In some cases, you sell your soul in order to get access to that technology. So I teach bootstrapping to make sure you're not using free technology, because you need to be in control of what your business does next. You need to be in control of your IP. You need to make sure it's not something that somebody can just steal. So, for example, this is December 2022. On average, I have between 6 and 8 founders every week who come to me to say, I built my 6, 7, 8-figure business on the social platforms you all know, and they turned off my account today. And the reason for that is it's not humans at the back end anymore. It's AI. And so if you get your account terminated, you won't get it back. And if you've built your business on that, that's your income gone forever. And often these accounts are actually hacked accounts. So it's a criminal that's taken over your business. And goodness knows what he'll do with it. But I can tell you that what they're generally doing is drugs trafficking, people trafficking, and terrorism. They'll monetize what you've built. And that's not okay. So I'm teaching ways to make sure you're not using free technology. I'm called the bootstrapping queen. So found your business on a solid business with income. I teach something called profit for purpose. So you can make profit. That's good. That's not what I do. My societal sort of approach to my whole career has been give back. And if you're looking to be mentored by me for profit, I will do that, of course, because I put that money into good causes. But actually, the people that are taking my help more are the ones that have a purpose, like I do, of inclusion, and teaching them how to monetize what they do such that they can develop that purpose. On average, that means developing 3 income streams till they get to their passion project, like the empathy economy. And the thing about the sharing economy is it's competitive. Somebody will always be after what you have because it's founded on profit only. It's no motivation other than money. Whereas profit for purpose in the empathy economy, the business model there is collaborative. So we all do a little, so we all gain a lot. And we're a community. And to be honest with you, whatever else I've done in my career, if that's the reason I've had to deal with what I've gone through in my career to get to here, I'm thrilled because this is the most amazing thing. You know, I've built a community. I'm building on LinkedIn. I built a community, and the empathy economy itself is in 172 countries now. There's over 10 million entrepreneurs that have had the initial outputs from that. In order for me to test what I'm doing, I test in the millions. I always test in the millions. And then in 2023, I'll be launching the Empathy Economy membership, and you'll be able to get your business personally mentored by me. And I've committed to mentoring 1 million entrepreneurs or change makers if you want to make an impact on the world. Because I know from all the work I've done, if I can support 1 million entrepreneurs or change makers to deliver their impact, then we will have tipped the balance in our favor, and the web will genuinely be for humanity to understand its own truth. So this is, whatever else I've done till now, the place where I think I was meant to be. That's the now goal. And I'm obviously doing that sat at a lot of very important tables across the world as well.
So where this understanding came from, connecting humanity and technology and making them use it effectively?
Well, I think one of the things in my early career as an aerospace engineer in a computing field, where I was just felt that the discipline was diabolical, I could never understand why you would build something just because the technology was interesting. It had to do something. You know, I want to know what it enables, what it unpacks. And so for me, it was I ask people when they say, oh, have a look at my technology. I say, I won't have a look at your technology until you tell me what problem you're solving. So I've mentored 3 unicorns, $1 billion valuations for each company, one on its way to a Dedicorn, $1 trillion valuation, where that question was really concrete. They understood what problem they were solving. And I find it, a sort of an indication of the rise of the empathy economy, that company is on its way to Dedicorn, $1 trillion valuation, and Amazon is on its way out from Dedicorn. It's peaked. It's now less than $1 trillion valuation. And you'll see many of what I call the MAFA, the big tech companies, where they're shedding people because their business model isn't working anymore. And so they're going to have to come up with something new. But I think really what it's all about is, does technology enable something or is it just shiny? You know, we can all get lost in the technology. We've only got to look at ChatGPT that was what is it, 7 days ago now? Within 5 days had 1 million active users. We all love the shiny, we all love the new. But actually, what does it do? And then I suppose in my counterterrorism world, the thing I always have to ask is, what adversarial use will the criminals put to it? Because I've been working in Ukraine since February the 10th, before Russia invaded. And I've spent most of that time dealing with adversarial use of tech to destroy, tech to misinform, tech to put lives at risk. You know, so we have to think of the consequences of what we're doing in technology. I believe we have a moral obligation to what we build. But unless it's an enabling technology to make something happen that the world needs to see, why are we doing it? But there's many technology that is the shiny and not the purposeful, really.
And what made you to be in top 15?
What made me to be in
Top 15.
COP15? I'm not at COP15. I don't generally go to the COPs. I'm working with the 17 UN agencies that are overarching the net zero agenda. So I'm producing the roadmaps and the next steps along the COP road. So we're already preparing for COP28 now. But I wouldn't need to attend. It may well be that I will move to that role, but I haven't done that yet. Just because, quite frankly, everything has to run around the work I'm doing in Ukraine. And so that would be too big a commitment whilst we make sure that Ukraine has what it needs. I have 300 organizations there, over 15,000 people I'm supporting in over 20 countries. It's changed the geopolitical landscape of our world forever. I don't really see it as anything more important. What's happened in Ukraine can happen to any country on earth unless Ukraine wins, and that can't be.
And you are a UN advisor as well.
Yes. And so the overarching budget for all the 193 member states is an annual budget of $13 trillion. So effectively, we are redirecting that money towards solving the climate change problem. And that's a complicated agenda, of course, but it needs a new approach. We have just 7 years left to get to the 2030 goal, which is our marker for the 1.5 degrees that we need to succeed. And as anybody who read the output for COP27, we're not there. So 2023 sees me doing something new, which actually for all businesses and for all entrepreneurs, I've done something for you all, because we knew going into COP27 it would be difficult. It's not disastrous yet, but it is difficult. And so I made some plans to do something new. I'm under contract with LinkedIn to write their sustainability catalogue. And I'm almost at the point of finishing the very first course that tells every one of the 850 million LinkedIn users how to make their contribution to climate change. If you're a premium member on LinkedIn, you get that for free because that's the way it works. And I'm hoping that 2023 is the year of business for climate change. I'm hoping that all of us who don't know what to do and want to contribute will pick that course up and walk with me on the journey to net zero. I'm quite excited about that prospect of being able to give everybody a seat at that net zero table.
And you are G20 advisor.
Yes, I haven't done much with the G20 since I started with the UN. It was a fair challenge from the UN that I've done the work with the G20, but that was only 60% of the world's GDP, and that was not an inclusion agenda, which was quite correct. So I have devoted more time to that. And then because of the geopolitical changes, I've devoted more time to G7. So G7 really now, and the UN. G20 has its challenges now, particularly whilst Russia is attempting to occupy Ukraine. That's, something that, again, sitting down with people. I'm a science diplomat. On behalf of the UK, I sit down with people that have a great grievance against other countries and grievances against the UK. But it can only start with dialogue. It cannot start with war. So I'm not expecting to go back to G20 until Ukraine wins this war, if at all, really.
And you are a smart city, sir.
Yeah. That's a curious one. I told you about my data journalism, being the co-founder of the data journalism industry. I regularly still get calls from PhD cohorts of journalists, because I've written 3 data journalism books that are what are called primers for our data journalists. When they do their PhDs, they're made to read these books, dissect them, use them as inspiration, all of that. And so we've got some great PhD cohorts. If you already respect investigative journalists, just wait till you see what's coming, because this is the start of the end of Gen Z investigative journalists and the start of Gen Alpha. Not quite, a little bit too early for Gen Alpha yet, but Gen Z have got in their stride, and they are passionate about progress, and they're passionate about truth. And I often get questions from them saying, but Jacqui, why are we meant to be doing this? Why can't we help in Ukraine? No, what you're doing is important. There are experienced journalists in Ukraine, for example. But also I get requests from journalists all over the world, and not data journalists, who say to me, Jacqui, can you just explain this to me? I don't get what's going on here. And back in 2018, a very good friend of mine, who is in the international team for the Telegraph, said to me, I'm completely muddled with this. Can you make sense of this smart city thing? It seems a mess to me. And I said, that's because it's a mess, Olivia. She's like, oh, really? So can we unpack that mess? So then there was a series of articles across the international press about the smart cities are. And it was like, okay then, because of course I'm known to them, and I'm able to explain complex things like the industrial internet of things, like quantum computing, and so they just crowned me the smart cities are. But the reality of it is I do sit with cities all across the world to look at what they're trying to do, because the smart city mission is a good one, to improve the health and well-being of their citizens. That's what it's all about. Except by 2018, what we got to was a bunch of shiny tech that was doing nothing other than cost cities a lot of money and doing actually nothing useful. But worse than that, putting people's, citizens or visitors to cities' lives at risk, invading their privacy, creating surveillance areas, the absolute opposite of what smart cities are meant to do. And that's because they were buying tech that didn't have a purpose. What I was generally asking in 2018 was, what problem are you trying to solve? You'll see that's a recurring theme. And none of the problems they were trying to solve could be solved with the tech they bought. But of course, not all technology vendors are equal. Not all of them will sell you what you need. They'll sell you what they want to sell. And if you don't have somebody in the smart city side that understands that technology, good sales pitch, and people are in. And so actually, the whole smart city movement was upended in 2018. And I just wrote a series of articles. I did a book as well, about what this should be, not what it was. And since then, I've worked in cities across the world. I did February in 22, I did an event for 8 million businesses across JPAC, talking to them about what the changes were that technology is going to bring and how that would impact people's lives and why it was important to invest in them. And then I had a special piece on energy, why energy was going to be the differentiator and how we could make that renewable and move to a net zero agenda. So that was hugely well received. So as Smart Cities Are, I do all sorts of things. But it's really about communicating that enabling technology is the answer to all of this. And then the new work I'm doing in the UN is about that enabling technology. So we are currently writing a publication for the cities across the world to actually help them understand the difference of technology just for technology's sake, and then technology that enable them to support the health and well-being of their citizens. Because it's clear that cities are very confused. So I'm currently doing that with 17 UN agencies, and we'll put that publication out early next year so that we can really pull together all the UN material for net zero and then layer on top of it how that technology enables it. I doubt it's the only thing we'll need to do, but it's very much needed to help cities make better choices on technology.
Great. And also your science diploma.
Yes, now that's a really interesting one. I love this work because I work across the world creating consensus. Like I say, I worked in China for 2.5 years. I've worked in Russia. I've worked in Iran. Places that are difficult to create consensus. But since really I started FlyingBinary, one of the things I've had is the ability to ask all the unheard voices across the world, what is it you want? And at G20, what happened is I walked into Saudi Arabia. If you remember from the beginning of this, I lost my technology career, my aerospace career, and ended up in technology because Saudi Arabia bought the aircraft that I'd helped design, and I was out of a job. Well, I walked back into Saudi Arabia at the beginning of just before the pandemic, February 2020, and delivered an inclusion agenda in Saudi Arabia with the help of millions of people across the world to bring their unheard voices. So Saudi Arabia had an idea of what they were doing with their G20, and I had 27 million young people say, not what we want. And so I was able to adjust that G20 agenda because lots of people around the G20 tables have an opinion, but I had the data. And what I was able to do with that data is to say, if you listen to these young people across the world, the loudest voices were the under 30s. No surprise to me, I know how powerful Gen Z are. But if you were to listen to this, your GDP growth would be, and I can't give you this number because it's restricted, but the GDP growth you would put into your countries is this. There was no argument. And those young people helped me frame that data in order to make a compelling argument for why our country should change what it does. And I realized then the power of that. So what happened then was the UK was starting to support the 8 Latin American countries as part of, we've done outreach to many countries. Obviously, India is a dear friend of ours, and we're doing lots of work in India, but we were doing an outreach to 8 Latin American countries, and they asked about how could we bring together the offer for the UK and the Latin American countries, which you can't put them all together. It's like trying to say, Mumbai, Hyderabad, and Jaipur are the same. They're clearly not the same. And so 8 Latin American countries have their own culture, their own offer, their own specialty. But if as you were to consider them as a community, what could we do? And my answer was, if we had 1,600 people. Well, I actually said 600 people, but it turned out we had 1,600 people, young people who were challenging whatever we did, young leaders who may want to go into politics, who may end up in business, but who had a passion for supporting the next steps for their countries, then we would get the right answer. So that's exactly what we did. We took over Cambridge, which is one of our university cities in the UK, in the summer break. We literally took it over. And we brought about 600 of these young people from across Latin America to the UK. And we literally went through it all, created businesses, created offers. And at that point, what the ambassadors said was, this is science diplomacy. So I've already considered a diplomat for the work I do, but you're doing it with science. And so, again, that was the original idea, came from what I did in G20s, is putting that evidence base together, that web science together, but then making it compelling for somebody to say yes. And then effectively everything that rolled on from there. And so that's now become a thing. So I regularly will get a request from a group of nations. I can't really name them because that's not the thing I would do, but a group of nations who have common interests, who would hire me to, as a UK science diplomat, to come in and talk to them about what they do. Oftentimes I bring them here because there's lots of other people I would want them to meet in the UK. I would want them to take them into Parliament. I would want them to meet, say, other technologists. I try to create like an experience for that. But that's not always possible. Sometimes I go to them. And literally, let's have this global conversation. Let's learn from what the G20 already knows. And let's power the engine of what you're doing with the voices of these unheard voices of our young people who, quite frankly, it's your future, not ours. And so why are you not at the table? But there's not a mechanism for doing that. Arguably, what I've done with the LinkedIn course is create a bigger table. So you're going to get the material that if you were sat around a net zero table at the UN, you would see. So I'm actually going to, make you see at the table if you take the course. But as a science diplomat, I always, this is, if you ever meet me in this arena, you'll know that I promise you I will say this, usually at the beginning. I hear your opinion, but you must know that opinion is the lowest form of knowledge. What I have told you is based on science, based on data, and based on results. And this is what this is what you can gain by this. And it's a compelling way of having a new dialogue, being a science diplomat, because you have to do it in a consensual way. You have to be respectful of cultures, respectful of positions, but actually underpin it with science. I'm not aware of any other country that does this. I'm only aware of the UK that does this. As far as I know, there's just 3 of us that do it. But just because we are looking at a global level to not just, it's great to be able to have consensus and move forward on a global footing. That's the reason that Ukraine is getting the help it needs, because we've at global level had the discussion. But as smart cities are, another thing I often say is there is a core proposition for a smart city, which is health and well-being of its citizens. But there's only one thing every city in the world has in common. They're all different. So as a science diplomat, it's really important for me that I maintain the integrity of whichever country I'm working with, whichever set of countries I'm working with, and look to do what I do in their setting. Because I found, like with some of the entrepreneurs I work with in, say, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, one of the African nations, in India, that the countries always contribute something that the world doesn't know. And so if what I try to do is tell you what I've done before, then I'm transplanting a developed world perspective. So I always do this exercise of reaching out across the world, ask the wicked questions of not just our young people, I do ask everybody, but the real key answers and the real key challenges come from our under 30s. And I bring that to the table. And oftentimes it's not something, our young people are not asking oftentimes for something radically different, but they are often asking for a different priority. Stop doing what you're doing now and do this instead. And that often gets a lot of support once those priorities are changed, and then gives an opportunity for those young people to get involved, like the 1,600 people from across the Latin American countries. Once we did that, they all went back to their countries, took an active civic role in that. Their families were so proud of what they did. I was so proud of what they did, because they're the future leaders in all of those 8 countries. So a science diplomat's a very unusual thing to do, but it's genuinely one of my passions, because it's one of those things that it feels such a privilege to be able to do it, you know?
Great. And also, you are into top 10 IoT innovative.
Mm. Sorry, my sound just cut out then. Can you repeat that?
You are top 10 IoT innovator.
Yes, well, I think that that one is a very interesting one, because that's something that from the first day at FlyingBinary, we knew we were going to build for the industrial Internet of Things. Always. We knew that's what it was. But nobody else, there are only 2 women in that top 10 as well, me and another lady. Nobody else in that top 10 builds for society. Nobody else is taking that view. And I'm always conscious of not just what problem we're solving, but what difference will we make? What will the impact be? Is that the impact we're trying to curate? And that was something that the judges on that one were, my goodness, Jacqui, do you sleep? And I think this is a sort of common misconception about what I do, because I'm a web scientist and I'm only ever looking at something for the planet. I don't tend to have a vertical focus ever. Now, I'm a lateral thinker as well. I'm neurodiverse, as I said, so I don't think the way the rest of the world generally thinks. And for me, unlocking what I do is a passion. Machines do that for me. I trained as an aerospace engineer. I know that machines, what does an aircraft do for us, etc. And so I was always fascinated by what technology, what aircraft could help us to do. And obviously, aircraft have connected our world. The industrial Internet of Things is very similar. It will connect our world. And, you think in places where there isn't, in the developing world, where there isn't the infrastructure that we have here, with some renewable technology, some industrial Internet of Things deployments, which are not very expensive, we do in India, for example, have communities that are self-maintaining, self-powered, businesses running off solar power, arrays of solar being put to the benefit of the region. The ingenuity and creativity is incredible, but we have to be able to have the basic hardware to do that. And of course, in my counterterrorism role, not something that the terrorists can attack or hack. So very much I've been focused on that and looking at bringing that to the world. I also focus on, and this is pre-pandemic, what risks you carry by working from home, not necessarily for your day job, because pre-pandemic, FlyingBinary was born a virtual company. We do have hubs we work in because we like to get together and we work together, but largely we all work from wherever we happen to be in the world. But so we were one of the early companies that looked at the risk you ran from doing the work you do in an environment that wasn't secured, that wasn't an office environment, because we felt that companies like ours back in 2009 were quite unusual, but we viewed it as the future of work. And so we've always looked at that. And so one of the things that the judges said was, whoa, you've even looked at our homes and how all that works. And I produced some data for them. And would you like to have a guess what the number one risk in your home is from a criminal attack? What IoT device the criminals are after? Would you like to have a guess? Just say something. You just give me an answer.
Yeah, I got you.
So I'll give you the answer. It's your thermostat in your house. If they control how warm your house is, they control you. And so, things that you don't think about that criminals do because they're looking for the easiest attack vector. So it was things like that that got me that award. They were like, whoa, Jacqui. Like I say, do you never sleep?
And tell me, you as a data journalist.
Yes. So I think that I talked to you about founding the data journalism industry back in 2011, and we really have gone from strength to strength. And I'm so proud of the work everybody does every day. I put my life on the line a number of times, and I have colleagues every day that do that too. But it's really important that this amazing facility that Tim Berners-Lee created, the World Wide Web, is not poisoned by people that don't want the truth to be there. Because its original point was to connect humanity with its own truth. So that's very much a passionate project of mine, and the work I do, and supporting young journalists, data journalists who are starting their careers, because it's the most fascinating thing. When you're in a newsroom and you're creating the stories, you don't have a lot of time. We're about to launch a new piece of work on that in 2023 around the Sustainable Development Goals for the UN. And we're just sort of tying that up now. And I think that it's the thing that's contributed most to my web science work, because it's brought all those other voices into what I do. It turns out over that period, 2011 to now, so that's pretty much 12 years, only 8% of us across the world can do what we do as data journalists. But it turns out that 90% want to see what we do. So people are hugely interested in the stories we create. And so I feel that that's a massive contribution to inclusion, because we make the web science we pioneered means that, it considers a disability, it considers neurodiversity. If you're not neurotypical and you're neurodiverse, we build those stories for you. And so it's a massive contribution. And I'm so proud of the work everybody does every day for our world, really.
That's great. And tell me, you as a founder of Empathy Economy.
Yeah, well, as I said to you before, that's been something that I realized was going to it was really going to poison the work we've done, because the sharing economy was not creating an inclusive world. So I think the thing to say about it is I will be releasing the Empathy Economy membership in 2023, and I'm looking for the entrepreneurs and the change makers to want to make the impact that I've made. The 10 million that are already working in it, I've got the first phase of that for me to help me understand how to do what I've just described. And they are already working on their pieces, but they haven't been personally mentored by me. And this will be an offer to be personally mentored by me. And if anybody follows me on LinkedIn, you'll definitely get the details, because that's where the word will go out there. And the reality of it is, I'm keen to make sure with the empathy economy that I share my success plan for you and your business so that, you can outpace me. I'm sure everybody can outpace me with my support. And what often the entrepreneurs, well, the change makers as well say is, you be the wind beneath my wings, Jacqui, and I can achieve anything. And I firmly believe that. If you've got a purpose, or even if you need to find your purpose, but if you're not just profit bound, then the empathy economy membership's for you.
I'll put your web links in the description of this video on YouTube. People who finds our
Thank
video
you.
on YouTube can see the work that you're doing, can see the contribution that you're doing to the society and the global audience. So, and also I'll put on the screen as well. They can see it. Can you
Oh,
also
brilliant.
can you also spell your presence to my podcast listeners?
Can I also what, sorry?
Can you spell it?
The empathy
Can you?
economy.
Yeah, can you spell your social presence to my
Yes,
listeners?
I can send you that on the follow up. So when I can send you that on the follow up. Yeah.
And one last observation that I needed. What do you say about my work? Have you seen any videos of mine on YouTube?
No, you've been very mean and not shared them, and you must do that. Do that. I'd love to support your work.
Yeah, and how talking with experts like you around the world, how this experience is going to be helpful for me if I work in IT in coming days.
Yeah, I mean it will be because you'll get ideas, you'll make connections, and it's, as I said to you, the empathy economy is all about collaboration, not competitive. And so once you're in my world, you're in the empathy economy today. Anybody watching this, then actually you're a chance of success. Don't forget, the United Nations budget for annual budget is $13 trillion. Are you going to walk away from that? I don't think so. I'm going to have to go now, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. Can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Yes, absolutely.
And also everywhere on the internet?
Second?
And everywhere on the internet, can I put it everywhere?
Yeah, just tag me and I'll amplify it.
Sure. Thank you very much again.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day. Take
You
care.
too. Bye.
Bye.